The 15 most brutal punishments of the Old West. Number 1. Public executions in the Old West. Law. They were dramatic events that stirred the entire community. With the crack of a trapdoor and the swift drop of a condemned criminal, townspeople bore witness to the law's uncompromising nature. The crowd, made up of men, women, and children, gathered to feel the thrill of justice and to reinforce a collective sense of morality. For many, witnessing an execution was a stark reminder of the consequences of crossing the line, acting both as a deterrent and as a grim spectacle that united communities. Often, these public hangings were a form of entertainment, drawing people from distant areas. They would travel for hours, sometimes days, to see a well-known outlaw meet his fate. Families and vendors sold refreshments, as if it were a fair. The crowd would murmur in anticipation, waiting for the final words of the condemned. This brutal display highlighted the harsh realities of frontier life, where law enforcement was scarce and justice was served swiftly, often without the extensive trials we see today. Number 2. When infamous outlaws like Billy were sentenced, their executions drew massive audiences, captivated by tales of daring crimes and legendary escapes. Though Billy managed to escape the hangman's noose temporarily, his near execution set dangers and adventures of the Wild West, leaving people both frightened and fascinated. His legend only grew as stories of his deeds circulated far and wide, making him both a villain and an anti-hero in the eyes of many. Such high-profile executions didn't just end with the outlaw's death. They also provided townsfolk to pass down stories that would become part of the folklore of the Wild West. People would recount every detail of the execution, the outlaw's final words, the crowd, and the solemn figure of the hangman performing his duty. These stories would be retold around campfires, in saloons, and at family gatherings, embedding these figures in the very fabric of Western culture. Number 3. The act of hanging was a public performance, meticulously planned to maximize the condemned's suffering and the crowd's shock. As the prisoner was led to the gallows, a hush would fall over the crowd. A hood would be placed over the condemned's head, and a rope adjusted around their neck, the beginning of their final moments. These procedures were punitive but served as a theatrical warning, deeply embedding fear into those who might consider breaking the law. Spectators often watched in horrified awe, seeing firsthand the physical suffering and psychological terror experienced by the condemned. The sight of a body hanging lifelessly served as a morbid symbol of the unforgiving justice system. With the slow swing of the body and the creak of the gallows, the message was clear. Defy the law, and this could be your fate. These moments were ingrained in the minds of onlookers, leaving an unforgettable impact on the conscience of the town. Number 4. One of the most infamous mass executions took place in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where Judge Isaac Parker sentenced 6 men to hang simultaneously. Known as the Hanging Judge, Parker's legacy was built on strict rulings and a fierce dedication to upholding law and order in a chaotic time. His reputation became so fierce and shudder at the mention of his name, knowing there was little chance of leniency under his watch. The 6 condemned men stood side by side as the gallows prepared to claim them, their faces hidden behind hoods as the crowd held its breath. Witnesses described the event as both horrific and mesmerizing, a carnival of death where the harshness of frontier justice was on full display. Parker's iron-fisted rule became legendary, and his methods, though severe, symbolized the relentless pursuit of order in a lawless land. Number 5. Public hangings often took on a carnival-like atmosphere, with vendors setting up stalls, treating the occasion as an outing. It wasn't uncommon for children to be lifted onto their parents' shoulders to get a better view of the condemned criminal's last moments. In some instances, platforms were constructed to accommodate the ever-growing crowds, highlighting how these events blurred the line between justice and entertainment. The townsfolk's reactions ranged from excitement to revulsion as they watched with morbid fascination. Children's laughter mixed with the solemn faces of adults, creating a strange contrast between innocence and the harshness of frontier justice. This bizarre mix of festivity and grim spectacle underscored the duality of life in the Old West, where survival and morality often intertwined with dark curiosity and the need for social order. Number 6. Not all executions went smoothly. Some turned into grisly spectacles that left the crowd horrified. One of the most infamous examples was the botched hanging of Blackjack Ketchum, where the rope was too long, resulting in his decapitation. The gruesome sight of his headless body haunted those who witnessed it, an image so shocking that it became etched into local folklore. This incident, along with others like it, underscored the risks and brutality of the time, where even justice could turn deadly in unexpected ways. Souvenir hunters would rush forward after such botched executions, eager to collect fragments of the rope or cloth stained with blood, making these morbid moments lasting mementos of the West's brutal justice system. Number 7. The punishment system in the Old West extended beyond just the gallows. Places like the Yuma Territorial Prison became infamous for their harsh conditions. Located in the Arizona desert, Yuma Prison was a place of intense suffering, where temperatures often reached unbearable highs. Prisoners were crammed into tiny cells, enduring extreme heat and inadequate ventilation, making survival a daily challenge. The hellhole, as it was commonly known, pushed men to their limits. Prisoners often remarked that they were captives, not just of the law, but of the relentless desert sun that seared their skin and sapped their strength. Despite its inhumane conditions, Yuma was seen as a necessary institution in a time when the notion of rehabilitation was virtually non-existent, and the focus remained firmly on punishment. Number 8. Yuma Prison, despite its horrific conditions, offered prisoners a surprising chance at self-improvement. With a library of over 2,000 books and vocational training programs, some inmates found a semblance of hope in the otherwise bleak environment. The prison superintendent believed that even hardened criminals deserved the opportunity to reform, giving inmates access to education and useful skills. These programs were progressive for the time, though they did little to mask the brutal conditions. The prison's juxtaposition of rehabilitation and punishment symbolized the complex attitudes toward justice in the Old West. Many inmates took advantage of these programs, creating a small sense of purpose amid their suffering, though for most, the heat and confinement still defined their daily lives. Number 9. In contrast to Yuma, other prisons in the West were rudimentary and inhumane. In Tombstone, Arizona, the local jail was little more than a pit in the ground, covered by iron bars. Prisoners were lowered into this hole and left exposed to the elements, with no protection from the searing sun or freezing nights. Survival in such conditions required resilience, as prisoners battled both the environment and their own mental strain. Stories from these makeshift jails reveal the unforgiving reality of frontier justice, where basic human needs were often ignored. The harshness of these jails reflected the broader hardships of Western life, where resources were limited and compassion was in short supply. For many, incarceration in these conditions was a punishment that extended beyond the physical, scarring them mentally as well. Number 10. Chain gangs became a staple of labor and punishment, with prisoners forced to toil under extreme conditions. In Texas, inmates were leased to private contractors and made to work on sugar plantations from dawn to dusk, shackled by heavy chains. This practice, resembling slavery, treated prisoners as disposable labor, with little regard for their well-being or dignity. Reports from these chain gangs describe men with bloody ankles, their skin raw from the constant friction of the chains. They endured brutal conditions, driven by overseers who cared more about productivity than human decency. This form of punishment was a grim reminder of the exploitation that still permeated society, even after the end of slavery, and highlighted the harsh realities of life for those on the wrong side of the law. Number 11. The harsh treatment of prisoners extended to the dark depths of silver mines in Colorado, where inmates were forced to work up to 16 hours a day under hazardous conditions. These chain gangs labored in poorly ventilated, dimly lit tunnels, where accidents and illnesses were rampant. Many prisoners never saw daylight, enduring each day in a state of exhaustion, deprived of fresh air and basic safety measures. This brutal practice served as both a punishment and a warning. The high mortality rate among these inmates was a grim testament to the dangers of breaking the law. For those who survived, the experience left physical and psychological scars, a constant reminder of the price of crime in the unforgiving landscape of the Old West. The sight of men emerging from the mines, bruised and battered, served as a deterrent to would-be criminals. Number 12. The infamous Apache ring punishment was one of the most excruciating forms of torture in the West, devised to break both the body and the spirit of inmates. Prisoners were chained in a circle and forced to walk continuously, unable to rest. They moved at a slow, grueling pace, with iron collars around their necks and heavy chains connecting them, ensuring that if one man fell, others would stumble with him. This torturous method could last for days, pushing prisoners to the brink of collapse. Those who couldn't keep up were at the mercy of their fellow inmates, creating an atmosphere of tension and mutual resentment. For many, the Apache ring was worse than any physical punishment, as it pitted prisoners against each other in a fight for survival. It became a dark symbol of the extreme methods used to instill obedience and submission. Number 13. Water torture was another cruel method used in Texas prisons, where inmates were forced to drink excessive amounts of water, leading to severe stomach distension and near drowning from within. This brutal practice, known as the water cure, was used as both punishment and interrogation, often leading prisoners to confess crimes they hadn't committed just to escape the agony. The water cure left prisoners gasping for air, writhing in pain as their bodies struggled to cope with the internal drowning sensation. The practice, while effective for extracting information, raised ethical concerns even among the hardened lawmen of the West. It symbolized the extreme lengths to which the justice system would go, prioritizing results over humanity, often leaving inmates permanently scarred by the experience. Number 14. The Laramie jail tree in Wyoming served as an improvised prison where criminals were chained to a massive cottonwood tree, left exposed to the elements. For days, inmates endured rain, wind, and the hot sun, all while shackled to the trunk. It was not only a test of physical endurance, but also a source of public humiliation, as townsfolk would pass by, jeering at the prisoners on display. The jail tree became infamous, a place where criminals faced both nature's wrath and the disdain of the community. This unconventional jail captured the raw nature of frontier justice, where resources were limited and punishment was often swift and severe. Stories of the tree's prisoners circulated in the area, and when it was struck by lightning years later, locals saw it as a sign that even nature was ready to see it go. Number 15. By the late 1800s, calls for reform in the justice system grew louder, as tales of these brutal punishments spread across the nation. The establishment of the federal penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, in 1895 marked a shift toward a more standardized and regulated system of incarceration. With vocational training and a merit system for inmates, the prison symbolized a move towards rehabilitation, a stark contrast to the merciless practices of the past. Though Leavenworth represented progress, many frontier towns still clung to their old ways, unwilling to let go of the brutal traditions that had defined their justice systems. The tension between reformers and traditionalists highlighted the cultural divide of the time, as America struggled to find a balance between justice and humanity in an era marked by hardship and survival. The reforms at Leavenworth laid the groundwork for the modern prison system, signaling the end of an era where punishment was often as wild as the land it governed.